Yes, and I think we all reflect on the opportunity cost of lost rates with the
Exactly.
church going there.
Exactly.
I have a follow-up question to Peter, because I actually believe that the staff obviously do know what they're talking about when it comes to planning and waste disposal. So would the Albert Eden board reconsider, if it was put to them for the site by MOTAT, for an educational and drop-off site as one of the 2 drop-off sites that is an alternative strategy? And it could also be educational because it is next to a very good precinct there.
Indeed.
Okay, good.
Exactly. That's entirely consistent with what I just said, and in fact that's what I've been thinking for a month or so since I discovered that the Chinese garden was on the move again. It is clearly, especially the educational aspect, it's hard to imagine a better place to have a sustainability resource centre, educational centre. But it's never going to be anything more than a light waste recovery centre or a drop-off / light recovery centre, and that needs to be recognised. It is not the solution to the network problem.
Yep, no, but still it's a nice,
yes.
nice compromise. So thank you for
Yep,
that.
yep.
That's appreciated. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. And I'm really pleased to hear, Peter, that you'd consider that. When a few of us went to South Australia, they have a lot of collector depots and they are really community run. They don't have to be the big part where you have the landfill and you're doing all that. And one place we went to was called NORMA, which I think is National Association of Waste Management Australia. And Norma ran around with a funny wig on and she was the educator. But it actually wasn't a huge footprint in terms of the education centre, but kids could go there, classrooms. It was used all the time, all during the week and the weekends, but it was also what we called a collector depot. And they can be run by communities. And I look at that and I go, I'm looking at this on the GIS viewer. This land's worth 12 million. The improved value, 13.5. It's the old club rooms, I think, for the Chamberlain Park. But I see that as a really perfect site because it's well buffered from most residential, and I think that's important. It's on the bus route. And if you look at 13 and 14 here, it absolutely spells out the advantages and disadvantages, or the advantages of this site. And the other thing that nobody's talked about is the fact that this is almost a close intersect of Waitemata, the Faux, and Albert Eden Roscoe, and that's 3 local boards with quite high populations and easy access. So as well as the educational, it just gives another opportunity for people to, you know, when we're not going to have the organics so easily
I'm waiting for
accessible.
the question, Councillor Cooper.
Oh, sorry, this is really confusing because we have people making statements and questions, and
no,
I thought that at 12 o'clock...
All been
okay.
questions today. Do you have a question? No? Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify one thing I heard from Peter. Peter, you said 27 was an industrial land, but not according to the report.
Oh, well, that's what we heard before.
If I could just quickly speak to that. No, it's not currently industrial land. It's currently used as a works depot, but not in terms of, say, waste processing. So it's very, there's a variety of uses on there. Action traffic at the moment is currently on that site. There's a few other uses, but it's not industrial like what you'd find in the parts of Onehunga that we're looking at, where it's full industrial land, that waste processing can take place there, and the type of work that takes place at the moment on the Normanby Road site is there's occasional trucks driving in and out, but there's not actual waste processing or anything akin to that currently going on that site.
Chair, the other point I just want to follow up on is I've got some concern about that land being utilised for a church. Know that area pretty well. I think all of us in the report tells us that it's in close proximity to rail, etc. But I guess I want some clarification on the process by which the church would pay the best price, because I understand that that CRL acquisitions budget, all that money over on the CRL budget of 2.whatever billion, is ring fenced for all of that, and then this this is part of our portfolio within the wider council, but I just want to be satisfied that we're not going to be discounting the value of this title of land to accommodate what should be picked up out of the CRL budget. So I want to make sure, and Letitia talked about it, going through proper process to achieve best possible price. Is that process going to the market and then the CRL team having first right of refusal to match that best price? How do we make sure that we achieve the best possible price for the CRL team then to offer it to the church?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Yep, good.
Keeping in mind, we're still in commercial negotiations, and the parties here present. The process that we have been discussing through our funding manager and council, his counterpart within council, is the approach to which council and Auckland Transport deal with the land value itself. We have an obligation, as with council, to evidence that we were spending money, public money correctly, and so the first principle is the value of the land between council and Auckland Transport. That's the first principle, and that's one that we'll work carefully with council on. They're registered, they're valuers, and that process would be. I envision that process will result in establishing a market value that council's representatives are satisfied they've gotten the right price for it. That's one issue. The land then becomes available, and the existing church site, there's a relativity in value. It's actually a more valuable site, and it has better functionality on it. So,
great site.
Sorry?
It's a great site.
It's a great site. It has different functionality. We have to deal with the church over the functionality component of it. So there will be an additional cash payment in addition to the land that we will have to carefully negotiate. That will have to be fair to the owners of the church. It'll have to be fair to the public that pays for it. So that's where there'll be two different areas that we'll be looking very carefully at the value there to make sure everyone's been treated correctly. Yeah.
Okay, and just going to the B, and it talks about the partial proceeds. At what stage do we dig down into identifying what partial means? It just seems for me to pass a resolution or motion, put up a motion like that, and that becomes binding, it looks just too vague to me.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Darby, and we actually debated this ourselves for quite some time and went backwards and forwards on it. And we have tried to keep it deliberately vague because we don't want to be in a situation where an amount is capped and there's a potentially suitable site that we'd like to go out and acquire for a waste processing facility if one was found. And because we'd have to come back to the governing body, seek another resolution, the market is moving so incredibly quickly in Auckland at the moment, we'd miss out on that. We also, and we really, we understand that the local board members and the local board chairs have had real concerns that there's no dollar figure on there. So we have debated this, and we understand there's competing arguments for why there should be a dollar figure there. Ultimately, we came back to we want to be able to respond to the market, and we want flexibility to respond to the market, and that's why we've structured it this way.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you. Councillor Casey.
The word partial could mean anything between 1% and 99%, and I wondered if we could get some clarity. The boards were very clear in their needs on page 28 that should the sale of 27 Normanby Road go ahead, they'd like to retain up to $9 million. Can we put a figure in there rather than the partial? I mean, who's going to decide which partiality, which bit goes to the boards? And
we have recommended that this be delegated to the Board of Directors of Development Auckland and the CFO of Council. Happy to take direction from the governing body on this, so that we personally would really, and I've said this to the local board chairs as well, Marion lives in the Puke Te Papa area, I live in Waitemata, we want to see a recycling centre in our own neighbourhood, so we're personally very much in support of this, but we also realise that there's a need to actually have something more concrete in place, and we think the best person to actually sign that off is Council's Chief Financial Officer. In terms of actual land values, they're incredibly difficult to draw a line in the sand and figure out exactly what they are, and the reason for that is there's huge variances between what the value of industrial land is, say in Onehunga, versus what the value of a site in Mount Eden or Waitemata is, and also the cost of everything's so built up in the central area that you're largely looking at there already being considerable improvements on sites in the central area, which would be taken into account with the cost of any purchase. So we have some indicative values. Marion has them in front of her and she can speak more fully on that, but it is incredibly hard to come up with an arbitrary figure or an approximate figure of what we think it would be, and we've done a huge amount of work on this, you know, and I'm not trying to actually throw anyone off and, you know, make it, you know, come up with some pat answer to try and cover this up. We have done a huge amount of work on it, and at the end of the day, because of the huge variances in land value, particularly with the difference between industrial land and something that's under the proposed Auckland Unitary Plan zone for terraced houses and apartments, it's just too difficult to create an arbitrary figure, and that's why, yeah, we've decided not to do this. But Marion can talk about some of the approximate figures that we believe may be appropriate.
Sure, thanks Letitia. As Letitia mentioned, we undertook our acquisitions team undertook a desktop analysis of land values in the 3 local board areas and just outside the local board areas as well. Now this desktop analysis was on land only, and we found that in the Waitemata, Eden Albert Eden area, land was, say, a hectare of land we're talking about $20 million for a hectare of land. Our acquisitions team have advised that, you know, they would recommend to the Waste Solutions team and the local boards, if we were to go out to look for land in the Albert Eden Waitemata area, that we should be recommending or looking at a price of $2,000 to $2,200 per square metre. That's land only. Then we move to the Puketapapa area, and the indications from our acquisitions team is anything between $7 to $9 million for a hectare of land. And then we move towards the industrial area in Onehunga, being around Galway Street, Alfred Street, that area down towards the water. We're looking at anywhere between $3 million to $5 million per hectare. Again, these are indicative figures. Our acquisitions team have only looked at sales in the area in the last 12 months, and would need some basically a brief from council and a fiscal envelope to work within to go out to the market if they were to go and knock on doors. There isn't land of that size readily available on the market at the moment. And when there is, our acquisitions team have advised us that we are competing, as Shale mentioned earlier, with residential developers because...
Thank you, Marion, and I think we're all aware that you know, residential land property in those board areas has gone up by 45% in the last 3 years alone, and still rising.
Just to signal an amendment to B then, Mr Chairman, which is to remove the Board of Directors of Development Auckland. I was very clear when I heard the board's presentations. They have eminent confidence in our Chief Executive with no apparent conflict of interest.
So it'll be quite clear it is the Chief Executive, not the CFO. You have a seconder, Councillor Casey?
I'm sure I do.
And Mr Chair, we'd
Excuse
support
me,
that.
do you have a seconder?
I'm sure I do.
Yep, we'll find it.
Is to remove the Board of Directors of Development Auckland and leave the approval of the money to the Chief Executive of Auckland Council. There
is no seconder, so that lapses.
I'll
Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Wayne.
I'm happy to second it.
Yeah, I just want to ask Mr Stupple in relation to Normanby Road. I mean, we've heard this Normanby Road site bandied around for a number of years. In the last 5 years, it's come up probably every year. Have you looked at that site, and is that not fit in relation to the physical layout and what you need for a resource recovery centre?
Through the chair, yes,
about 2.5 years ago, we started a business case that trawled a number of sites and looked at Normanby Road and Great North Road. I guess that's evolved over the years. So I think, as Letitia said, if you look at those sites, if you go onto those sites and look at them operationally, yes, they're currently used, or they were a depot, they're used as storage areas. They would suit themselves to a community recycling centre. I suppose the position we're in is we know that one size doesn't fit all, and from a waste teams, we'll take what we can get our hands on. But we recognise now that clearly the financial analysis, we haven't got the budget to look at that as far as from an operational point of view. But also, I think some issues have come to light as well around planning and I suppose the suitability around the mix with other uses in the area. I'm not an expert on that. I need to take others' advice. So I think from where we've moved on to with this alternative strategy, looking at a larger site in Onehunga, and now potentially if we could get something in Great North Road and then maybe another drop-off site, whether that's in Puketapapa, then there's a really good mix and a good strategy and solution there to do something really special.